what kind of alternative versions of reality are out there. I mean, I think that more than anything, that's what has appealed to me about Robert Anton Wilson's work is just that he really proposes that there are other ways to look at the world.
To talk about Robert Anton Wilson is to speak of everything simultaneously without law, moral, or dogma. If truth is a path to be followed, it is marked by a trail of paradoxes at every turn. When I first left to attend the bizarre, wondrous land of Antioch, I was given a book that was said to help me connect myself with my environment and reality in itself. I was soon mesmerized by an intense journey through a multiverse of ideas, practices, and reality tunnels. As I continued reading Cosmic Trigger, among other books by Wilson, he introduced me to techniques of metaprogramming your own nervous system. Brilliant yet obscurely known scientists such as Nikolai Tesla and Wilhelm Reich, extraterrestrial communication, world conspiracies like the right-wing fantasy of the Illuminati, and a sensory perception designed to create the future in the present.
Says that the biggest joke the Illuminati played was convincing people that they didn't exist. Regardless of whether the Illuminati is a real thing or not, I think that you can just apply that idea to other things in terms of, you know, how we think about freedom. And I think that that's the best way for us to continue not being free is to just believe that we are, and this is all we have to aspire to be.
But he's able to phrase it for the populace to read. You know, you don't have to go through a 20th century philosophy book that's this big to figure out, okay, Foucault said this. Or you know, and before that somebody else did it, before that somebody else did it. And it really probably goes back to Plato or Aristotle. You know, almost all of it does. Or Lao Tzu in Taoism. But so he's the maverick. That's what I said. He's the maverick that it takes all this information and gives it to the mob.
If I was searching for the anarchistic anti-guru of today, this was it. But as Wilson describes in the introduction to Cosmic Trigger, these forms of self-psychotherapy weren't for everyone. But who was this self-proclaimed guerrilla ontologist, and why did I discover him now? The answer wasn't too far off, because in his book, Wilson describes his own Cosmic Trigger beginning in Yellow Springs, Ohio in the early 60s. Not believing in coincidence, I took this to be a sign of synchronicity, as defined by Carl Jung.
The phone rings before you pick it up, or you're reaching for it and it rings, and you're going to call the same person that that just called. I mean, what happens? I mean, there's a split second there. I mean, a split second. If you divide it up, there is a little spot where everything was energized. There's a little spot in your brain where you almost knew that it was going to ring even when you picked it up, but then you were going to pick it up anyway. It's like you were in sync with the whole universe, or not, or you're crazy. You could go either way. It all depends how you judge yourself after that moment. But that's what it has to do with time. I mean, synchronicity has to do with time. It's meaningful coincidence. It's not just coincidence. Synchronicity is meaningful. That means you remember it. There's meaning to it.
Robert Anton Wilson, along with his wife and 4 kids, lived on a small farm rented from Antioch College within the border of the South Glen. He worked in town for the Antioch Bookplate Company under Ernest Morgan, and was also associated with the Humanist Center founded in Yellow Springs. He eventually quit the Bookplate Company and left town with his family, owing the company money.
In a sense, Wilson was sort of thrown out of town. I mean, he was fired from his job. He had no future in the Humanist Association. They made that pretty clear to him, I mean, at least that there would be no paying job.
My journey in search of Robert Anton Wilson led me to the Vale. There I met George, who works for the Glen Helen Nature Preserve, and Wilson's former residence was in his own backyard. The house Wilson and his family had lived in was known as the Homestead, an old farmhouse that eventually became a place of communal living. Unfortunately, only fragmented remains of the homestead exist. The rest is buried under rubble after it was burned down in the early 70s, when it was deemed as a social hazard to the Yellow Springs community at large. It was here that Wilson experimented with psychoactive agents, such as peyote, that led to contacts with the surreal. Wilson logged encounters of telepathic communication with plants and a strange creature called mescalito, known to some Native American tribes who considered it the spirit of peyote, or what some psychologists consider a Jungian archetype.
When he took any of these drugs, he was able to, I think, tap into something greater than his own subjective experience.
I'd like to say that I went into the field and saw a green man, and then I followed him home, and I saw Barbara Danley, and she invited Leonard Nimoy to be part of the PhD program, and then he declined on tape, but he still had pointy ears, and he was still green. And then I said, look, this green man points to the same green man I saw in the field. And then it goes to Antioch. It all makes sense.
So I had found the mysterious Robert Anton Wilson, or at least a small piece of his life. But my journey does not end here, because after making these discoveries, I decided to write him, after trailing the path he walked in Yellow Springs. As of now, I still await a response, and who knows, maybe he would want to explore Antioch and Yellow Springs once more. Of all the discoveries of this universe, Wilson assured me that humor may be the underlying characteristic of it all.